My parents sold my lake house to fund my sister's $150,000 wedding. They laughed, saying, "Thanks for the wedding present." I smiled and told them to check their mail. Their faces went pale when they saw. They didn't just sell my sanctuary. They stole my past, my future, and the last shred of trust one had in them. When I found out my own parents had secretly sold the lake house my grandfather left me, my most treasured possession, all to fund my sister Hannah's ridiculously extravagant wedding, something inside me shattered irrevocably. I'm Audrey, 34, and that lake house wasn't just a building, it was everything. It was my grandfather Jack's legacy. A place he built with his own hands in the 70s. A rustic cabin on 3 acres of waterfront property on Lake Winnipesaukee. Every summer from the time I was 5 until I left for college I was there. Fishing with Grandpa, learning to fix things, listening to his stories. He was the only one in my family who truly saw me. While my parents were always orbiting Hannah's dramatics and demands, Grandpa Jack showed me what real connection felt like. The dock where I'd dangle my feet for hours, the old fishing boat, the canoe he taught me to paddle. Every corner held a piece of my childhood, a piece of me. So when Grandpa Jack passed away 6 years ago, and his will explicitly left the lake house to me, everyone was stunned. To my granddaughter Audrey, the lawyer read, who appreciates the value of hard work and solitude, I leave my lake house, in the hope that she will find the same peace there that I did. My parents' faces were a mask of shock, my mother quickly slapping on a smile that didn't reach her eyes. How wonderful, Audrey. You always were Jack's favorite, she said, but the tone implied I'd cheated somehow. My dad just looked disappointed, probably already calculating the fortune they couldn't get their hands on. Hannah, who was 27 then, didn't even try to hide her fury. But that property is worth a fortune now. Why would he leave it all to Audrey? I spent just as much time there as she did. Which, let's be clear, was a complete lie. Hannah found the lake house boring after a day. She preferred civilization, shopping, socializing. This moment was just another chapter in a lifelong pattern. Our family dynamic was always Hannah as the sun, and the rest of us just satellites. She was the pretty one, the social one, the one who needed things. I was the responsible one, the self-sufficient one, the one who was supposed to understand when resources went to Hannah. Ballet lessons for Hannah? Money was found. Summer architecture camp for me? Save your babysitting money, Audrey. Hannah crashed her first car? Replaced instantly. My college textbooks? I worked 2 jobs to afford them. Despite it all, I put myself through school, built a successful career as an architect, and now own my own respected firm. My parents acknowledged my success with a detached surprise, as if I defied their expectations. Hannah, meanwhile, bounced from job to job, always finding fault, always subsidized by my parents. Rent, credit cards, new cars, they never questioned her choices. 3 years ago, Hannah met James and my parents were ecstatic. He came from money, worked at his dad's investment firm, and seemed like he could maintain Hannah's lavish lifestyle. What they conveniently ignored was that James was just as financially irresponsible as Hannah. Designer clothes, expensive cars, lavish vacations, but he was drowning in debt. When they got engaged, Hannah immediately launched into planning her dream wedding. First, it sounded reasonable. Then, like everything Hannah touched, it exploded. From 100 guests to 300, a local country club to an exclusive resort, a simple white dress to a custom designer gown. I was happy for her truly and even offered to help. I suggested the lake house could host a beautiful rehearsal dinner or pre-wedding photos. She scoffed, wanting more glamorous settings. I attributed it to her usual extravagance, never, ever imagining the sinister truth. As the wedding planning progressed, my parents started looking increasingly stressed. My dad, usually bragging about business, became vague. My mom developed a nervous habit of checking her phone whenever money came up. When I asked if they were worried about the costs, my dad dismissed it with forced cheerfulness. Your sister only gets married once, he said, which, knowing Hannah, was statistically doubtful. We want her day to be perfect. I even offered a few thousand, a stretch for my own budget, but my dad cut my mom off. That's very generous, Audrey, but unnecessary. We have it under control. In hindsight, the signs were screaming, but I just couldn't fathom how far they'd go. 6 months before the wedding, the subtle hints morphed into glaring red flags. Hannah's Instagram transformed into a showcase of pure extravagance. A dress handcrafted in France, a photographer charging $15,000, weekly updates on custom invitations and monogrammed everything. One Sunday at dinner, I casually mentioned wanting to spend a long weekend at the lake house to do some maintenance. "Oh, you don't need to bother with that," my mother said a little too quickly. "Your father hired someone to look after things." This was news to me. Really? Who? My father suddenly became very interested in his mashed potatoes. Just someone new. Ted retired. But Ted Johnson, my usual caretaker, had just spoken to me 2 months earlier with no mention of retirement. I called him the next day, voicemail. All week, same thing. Something felt deeply wrong. Around the same time, I noticed several family photos missing from my parents' living room walls. Specifically, ones with the lake house in the background. My mom claimed they were being reframed. Then came the shopping spree. Hannah showed up at another dinner with a diamond bracelet, an early wedding gift from mom and dad. The next week, she announced a 3-week honeymoon in Bali and the Maldives, staying in overwater bungalows. The week after that, she pulled up in a brand new BMW, replacing her perfectly functional car. Where is all this money coming from? I asked my friend Sophia over coffee. Hannah's wedding has morphed into something out of a celebrity magazine. And now all these expensive gifts? Sophia suggested James's family, which made sense until I ran into James himself. "Audrey, just the person I wanted to see," he said, giving me an unexpected hug. "I haven't had a chance to thank you properly." "Thank me for what?" I asked, utterly confused. "For your incredibly generous contribution to the wedding. Hannah told me how much it means to her to have your support." He suddenly looked uncomfortable, realizing he'd spoken out of turn. "You know what? I think I misunderstood something." "Never mind." I left with my takeout and a growing knot of dread in my stomach. The next strange incident was a call from Dorothy Matthews, a neighbor at the lake. "Audrey, dear, I wanted to check in about the sale. Will you still be coming up to visit occasionally? We'll miss seeing you around." My heart started pounding. "Dorothy, what sale are you talking about?" A long pause. "Oh my, I think I may have spoken out of turn. Perhaps you should talk to your parents." I pressed for more, but she suddenly had an appointment and hung up. I immediately called the lake house landline. Number no longer in service. Then I checked my online banking. 3 failed attempts to access my primary savings account, all from an IP address I didn't recognize. At this point, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was happening with my lake house, and my parents were deliberately deceiving me. I took a day off work and drove straight up there. The 3-hour drive from Boston gave me plenty of time for my mind to race. Maybe they'd rented it out? Borrowed against it? They had no legal right to do either. The worst-case scenario felt too horrific to even contemplate. "My name is on the deed," I reassured myself. Asterisk, the property taxes come out of my account. Grandpa Jack's will was crystal clear. Asterisk, whatever was happening, I told myself it could be fixed. As I turned onto the familiar gravel road, I saw fresh tire tracks, deeper than usual. The old wooden sign, Whitaker's Rest, gone. Then I saw it, a moving truck. My first thought, bizarrely, was that they were delivering new furniture. But as I pulled closer, I saw people carrying things out of the house, not in. A middle-aged couple stood in the driveway, directing the movers. Neither was anyone I recognized. I parked and approached them, trying to keep my voice steady. "Excuse me, what's going on here? This is private property." The woman smiled. "Oh, hello there. Are you from the neighborhood?" "No," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "This is my house. I'm Audrey Whitaker. This property belongs to me." The couple exchanged confused glances. The man stepped forward. "I'm Robert Peterson, and this is my wife, Linda. There must be some mistake. We purchased this property 3 weeks ago. We closed on it last Friday." My legs nearly gave out beneath me. "That is impossible. I never sold this house. There must be some misunderstanding." Robert, now looking genuinely concerned, retrieved a folder from his car. "Here are all the sale papers. We bought it from Thomas and Elizabeth Whitaker. Are they relatives of yours?" "My parents. They had sold my house without my knowledge or consent." I flipped through the documents with trembling hands, seeing my parents' signatures on every page. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. My signature. Or rather, a pathetic, poor imitation of it. "This is not my signature," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I didn't sign these papers. I never agreed to sell this property." The Petersons looked horrified. "We had no idea," Linda said. "The sale went through a realtor. Everything seemed legitimate. We've already sold our previous home." I handed the papers back, struggling to maintain composure. "I'm sorry, but I need to speak with my attorney. This property was left to me by my grandfather. My parents had no right to sell it." Somehow I managed to get back to my car before the tears came. I sat there, sobbing uncontrollably, staring at the home that had been mine yesterday and now belonged to strangers. Through the windshield, I could see the Petersons having an animated discussion, occasionally glancing my way with concerned expressions. After pulling myself together, I drove straight to the county records office. The clerk was sympathetic, helping me locate the documents. Sure enough, a record of the sale dated 3 weeks earlier. Sold for $375,000, at least $175,000 below market value. A rush sale, cash buyers. As I was leaving, my phone rang. "Dorothy Matthews." "Audrey, I've been feeling terrible since our call. I think you should know what I overheard. I was at the general store about a month ago when your parents came in. They were talking about using the lake house money for Hannah's wedding. Your father specifically said they needed to take care of it before you found out. I assumed you had eventually agreed to the sale." I thanked her, my voice tight, and asked her to email a written statement. My next call was to my friend Stephanie, a real estate attorney. "They forged my signature, Steph. They sold my house to pay for Hannah's wedding." My voice broke. "Jesus, Audrey, that's not just unethical. That's criminal. Forgery, fraud, theft, you name it. Do you want me to meet you somewhere? You shouldn't be alone right now." We arranged to meet at her office. On the drive, another bank notification. Another attempted access to my account. It was like learning about the house had finally ripped the scales from my eyes, revealing a pattern of deception I'd been blind to. Stephanie reviewed the documents. "This is open and shut, Audrey. Your parents had no legal right to sell the property. The forged signature is clear fraud. We can get the sale reversed, though it will be messy and take some time. The poor buyers will have to be compensated for their trouble." Then came the crushing question. "Do you want to pursue criminal charges against your parents?" The words hit me like a physical blow. Did I want my own parents arrested? Despite everything, the immediate answer was no. I wanted justice, I wanted my property back, but I didn't want to see them in handcuffs. "I want to handle this carefully," I finally said. "Hannah's wedding is in 3 weeks. I don't want to detonate this bomb before then." Stephanie looked skeptical. "You're going to let them go through with the wedding using your money after what they did?" I've been asking myself the same question. Part of me wanted to burn it all down immediately, call the police, my parents, Hannah, expose everything. But another part, the strategic part, suggested a different approach. If I confront them now, it will be chaos. The focus will be on saving the wedding, not on what they did. Emotions will be running high, and somehow, I'll be positioned as the villain for ruining Hannah's special day. If I wait until after, there's nowhere to hide. The deed is done, literally and figuratively. Stephanie nodded slowly. "That makes sense. So what's the plan?" "We document everything now. We prepare all the legal paperwork. We get statements from Dorothy and anyone else who might have relevant information. We build an airtight case. And then the day after the wedding, we deploy it." Stephanie offered a grudging admiration. Cold but fair. As I drove home that evening, my phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from my mother asking about wedding details, and Hannah sending photos of floral arrangements. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. They were carrying on as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just committed a crime against me. I didn't respond, unsure I could maintain the facade of normalcy. That night I barely slept, alternating between rage, grief, and disbelief. By morning, one thing was clear. I would get my lake house back, and my family would never be the same again. The engagement party was at the Langham, a 5-star hotel in Boston. I considered not attending, but that would raise questions I wasn't ready to answer. I arrived 20 minutes late, partly from anxiety, partly as a small act of rebellion. The grand ballroom was transformed. Thousands of white orchids, crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures. A string quartet played. Hannah spotted me immediately, radiant in a beaded white gown that could have passed for a wedding dress itself. Audrey. Finally. I was worried you wouldn't make it. Isn't this amazing? Wait until you see the cake. I hugged her stiffly, searching her face for any sign of guilt. All I saw was her usual self-absorbed excitement. It's certainly elaborate for an engagement party, I managed. Hannah waved dismissively. You only get engaged once. Well, to the right person anyway. She giggled, as if her 2 previous broken engagements were charming quirks. Where are Mom and Dad? I asked, trying to sound casual. Over by the champagne fountain. They're talking to the wedding planner about adding fireworks to the reception. Can you believe it? Actual fireworks. I made my way through the room, greeting relatives, accepting compliments on the spectacular wedding plans, each one a knife twist. I finally spotted my parents deep in conversation with a sharp-dressed woman, the planner. I approached just close enough to overhear. The fireworks display will add $20,000 to the budget, the planner was saying, but the photos will be absolutely worth it. Plus, we've had a cancellation at the estate, so we can now offer the premium garden space for the cocktail hour at only an additional $5,000. My father nodded, tension around his eyes. Hannah deserves the best. Let's add both. The planner beamed. My mother touched my father's arm. Are you sure, Tom? We're already so far over budget. It's fine, he said firmly. The house money covered the essentials. We can put the extras on the equity line. I felt physically ill. The house money. My house money. Before I could decide whether to confront them, Hannah clinked a spoon against her glass. She and James stood on a small platform. James and I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, she began. And we especially want to thank my amazing parents who are making our dream wedding possible. The crowd applauded. And a special thank you to my sister Audrey, Hannah continued, finding me in the crowd, for her incredibly generous wedding gift. We couldn't have done any of this without you, sis. All eyes turned to me. I froze, unable to respond as the room erupted in applause. James raised his glass in my direction. My parents beamed. Thanks for the wedding present, my father called out, to appreciative laughter. I managed a tight smile and a slight nod, then immediately headed for the restroom, locking myself in a stall, trying to control my rapid breathing. They were publicly thanking me for a gift I never gave, for money stolen through fraud and forgery. The audacity was breathtaking. After splashing cold water on my face, I returned, determined to maintain composure. I needed to gather more information. I circulated, accepting congratulations for my generosity, with non-committal smiles. My Aunt Patricia cornered me by the dessert table. Audrey, darling, such sad news about selling the lake house. I know how much it meant to you, but what a wonderful sister you are to make such a sacrifice for Hannah's happiness. I nearly choked on my champagne. What exactly did you hear about the lake house, Aunt Patricia? Just that you decided to sell it to help fund the wedding. Your mother mentioned you were having second thoughts, but she assured me you came around to the idea. She said you realized you weren't using it enough to justify keeping it. Each word was another revelation of the narrative my parents had constructed. They weren't just thieves. They were actively working to control the story, painting me as the benevolent, sacrificing sister. As I made my way through the party, I saw evidence of the lake house money everywhere. The custom ice sculpture, monogrammed crystal champagne flutes, designer toiletries in the restrooms. I finally encountered my parents near the gift table. My mother embraced me warmly. Audrey, you look beautiful tonight. That blue really brings out your eyes. Thanks, Mom. Quite a party. Only the best for your sister, my father said, putting his arm around my shoulders. We're so proud of you both, you know. Hannah with her upcoming marriage, and you with your successful business. I wondered if he realized the irony. Hannah was being rewarded with a $150,000 wedding for finding someone to marry, while my years of hard work merited only a casual mention. The lake house sold quickly, I said, watching their faces carefully. My mother's smile faltered for a millisecond. Oh, have you been up there recently? I met the new owners, I said, keeping my voice neutral. The Petersons. They seem nice. My parents exchanged a quick glance. My father cleared his throat. Yes, well, property values in that area have really peaked. It was a good time to sell. Funny, I don't remember putting it on the market. Another glance. My mother laughed nervously. Audrey, this is hardly the time or place for this discussion. We should focus on celebrating Hannah's engagement. You're right, I said, smiling. We'll have plenty of time to discuss it later. I left the party shortly after, unable to stomach any more of the farce. In the Uber home, I called Stephanie. They're gaslighting you now, she said, creating a narrative where you agreed. This actually strengthens our case. It shows consciousness of guilt. They seem to think they'll get away with it, I said, staring out at the Boston skyline. They have no idea what's coming. The next morning, Stephanie and I formalized our strategy. She'd already drafted a preliminary legal brief. Unauthorized sale, forged documents. Here's what we know, she said, pulling up a document. Your parents sold the property for $375,000 on June 5th. Cash buyers, likely attracted by the below-market price. Your parents forged your signature on multiple documents, including the deed transfer. They appeared to have accessed the funds immediately, evidenced by deposits into their account and subsequent withdrawals for wedding expenses. How did they get away with this? I asked. Don't these documents require notarization? That's our next avenue, she replied. Either they found a notary willing to overlook the forgery, or more likely, they forged the notary's signature as well. We'll track them down. I rubbed my temples. What about the Petersons? They're innocent purchasers, but unfortunately, they don't have clear title. A forged deed cannot transfer ownership, no matter how innocent the buyer. The good news for them is they'll have recourse against your parents for fraud. The bad news for everyone is this will be messy. We spent the next hour outlining our approach. Stephanie would file an emergency injunction to prevent any further financial transactions related to the property. She'd also prepare documents to report the forgery to the district attorney's office, though we'd hold off on filing those until after the wedding. We should also consult with a criminal attorney, Stephanie suggested. The DA may want to pursue charges regardless of your wishes once this comes to light. She connected me with Martin Clean. This is a clear case of fraud, forgery, and theft, Martin said over lunch. The DA could absolutely pursue charges, and with the evidence you have, conviction would be likely. Your parents could be looking at substantial fines and potentially jail time. The thought made my stomach churn. Is there any way to resolve this without criminal charges? Possibly, Martin said. If they immediately acknowledge what they did, return all the money and make restitution, the DA might be persuaded to accept a plea deal with probation rather than incarceration. But that depends on many factors, including the DA's discretion and your parents' cooperation. Over the next week, I assembled a comprehensive file. Dorothy Matthews provided a written statement. I obtained bank records showing the suspicious deposit into my parents' account. Stephanie located the notary whose stamp appeared on the documents. She confirmed she'd never notarized those papers and would provide an affidavit stating her stamp had been used fraudulently. Most damning of all, I found online posts from Hannah about wedding expenses that directly correlated with withdrawals from my parents' account after the lake house sale. In one post, she shared photos of her $15,000 dress. On the same day, my parents withdrew that exact amount. What about the emotional impact? I asked Stephanie during one of our planning sessions. I want them to understand what they've taken from me. It wasn't just property. It was my connection to my grandfather, my memories, my future plans for that place. That's why I suggested the letter, Stephanie said. The legal documents handle the factual and financial. The letter is where you address the personal betrayal. I spent days drafting, revising, and redrafting that letter. How do you adequately express the feeling of having your own parents steal from you? How do you convey the depth of betrayal when the people who should protect you decide your inheritance is theirs to take? In the end, I kept it simple and direct. Asterisk Mom and Dad, what you did was not just illegal. It was a profound betrayal of trust. The lake house was not just property to me. It was my connection to Grandpa Jack, who saw me when the rest of the family didn't. It was my sanctuary when life became overwhelming. It was my future, my plans, my dreams. You took that from me without asking. You forged my name. You lied to everyone, creating a fiction where I had consented. You spent the money on one day of celebration for Hannah, prioritizing her desires over my rightful inheritance. I am pursuing all legal avenues to reclaim what is mine. The attached documents outline the serious legal consequences of your actions. This could have been avoided with a simple conversation. Instead, you chose deception and theft. Hannah's wedding will proceed as planned. I will not punish her by disrupting her day, though I have serious questions about her knowledge of and complicity in this scheme. But once the wedding is over, there will be a reckoning. Audrey. Asterisk. As the wedding approached, maintaining the charade became increasingly difficult. Hannah sent daily texts with wedding updates. My mother called repeatedly about bridesmaid dress fittings. My father emailed asking if I was planning to give a toast. I responded with minimal engagement, pleading work commitments. I attended the necessary pre-wedding events, maintaining a detached politeness that several relatives commented on. You seem distant, Audrey. Is everything okay? My uncle asked during the rehearsal dinner. Just busy with work, I replied with the practiced smile I'd perfected. The night before the wedding, I barely slept. I reviewed the plan one final time. Attend the wedding, maintain composure, allow Hannah her day. Then, the morning after, Stephanie would send the legal package to my parents via courier, and I would forward my letter via email. The reckoning would begin. As I finally drifted off, I thought of Grandpa Jack and what he would say. I could almost hear his voice. Stand your ground, Audrey. Some things are worth fighting for. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, as if even nature conspired to give Hannah her ideal day. The ceremony was at St. John's Episcopal Church, the reception at the Rosewood Estate, one of the most exclusive venues. I arrived early for photographs, wearing the pale pink gown Hannah had selected. The photographer positioned us on the church steps. Hannah stood in the center, radiant in her custom French gown with its 15-foot train and delicate beadwork. Throughout the session, I maintained composure by mentally cataloging the costs. Hannah's dress, $15,000. Hair and makeup for the bridal party, $3,000. Photographer and videographer, $15,000. Flowers for the church, $8,000. Each item, another piece of my stolen property, another memory of the lake house converted into ephemeral wedding trappings. The ceremony itself was elaborate. A string quartet, an opera singer, custom vows. Hannah cried beautifully on cue, her makeup perfect. James looked handsome. My parents beamed from the front row, proud architects of this perfect day. I performed my bridesmaid duties mechanically, holding Hannah's bouquet, adjusting her train, smiling for photos. Inside, I felt nothing but a cold determination to see this through. After the ceremony, guests were whisked to the Rosewood Estate in a fleet of vintage Rolls-Royce cars. The estate was transformed with thousands of flowers, twinkling lights, elegant drapery. Cocktail hour featured a raw bar, caviar station, and a champagne fountain identical to the one from the engagement party. I circulated, accepting congratulations on my sister's behalf, deflecting questions about the lake house. It was a difficult decision, I'd say, or sometimes we have to make sacrifices for family. Dinner was served in the grand ballroom. Wagyu beef, butter poached lobster, gold flake desserts. A 10-piece band, professional dancers. During the toasts, my father stood. To my beautiful daughter Hannah and her wonderful new husband James. Your mother and I could not be prouder. We have spared no expense to make this day perfect for you, because you deserve nothing but the best. The crowd applauded. I took a long sip of champagne to avoid having to smile. James's best man gave a speech, then Hannah, slightly tipsy. I just want to thank everyone who made this day possible, she said, her voice thick with emotion. My amazing parents who gave me everything I ever wanted. My wonderful new husband. And my sister Audrey who made the biggest sacrifice of all. She turned to look at me. I know how much that lake house meant to you. And the fact that you were willing to let it go for my special day means more than I can say. The room erupted in applause. Dozens of eyes were on me, expecting a response. I raised my glass slightly and nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As the evening progressed, the alcohol flowed, the dance floor filled. Cake cutting, first dance, father-daughter dance. All unfolded according to plan. I remained on the periphery, observing like an anthropologist studying unfamiliar rituals. Around midnight, my parents cornered me near the dessert table. "You've been quiet all day," my mother said, her words slightly slurred from wine. "Are you not having a good time?" "It's a beautiful wedding," I replied neutrally. "The best money could buy," my father said with a wink. "Or the best lake house could buy, I should say." He laughed at his own joke. "We never properly thanked you," my mother added, squeezing my arm, "for understanding about the house. It really was the only way to give Hannah the wedding she deserved." I looked at them, these two people who had raised me, who had just admitted to stealing from me as casually as commenting on the weather. A strange calm settled over me. "You should check your mail tomorrow," I said with a slight smile. My father frowned. "What? Why?" "Just some information I think you'll find interesting," I said. "Enjoy the rest of the evening." I walked away, leaving them looking confused. It was the only moment of satisfaction I had felt all day. The wedding concluded with a grand sparkler send-off. Hannah and James departed for their 3-week honeymoon in a vintage Bentley. Guests tossed rose petals. My parents stood arm in arm, exhausted but triumphant. I returned to my apartment and sent a text to Stephanie. "Wedding complete. Proceed as planned tomorrow." The next morning, precisely at 9 a.m., a courier delivered the legal package to my parents' home. It contained documentation of the forgery, statements from witnesses, bank records showing the transfer of funds, and legal notices of the actions being taken to reverse the sale and investigate the fraud. Simultaneously, I sent my letter via email to both my parents. At 9:01, my phone began ringing. First my father, then my mother, then back to my father again. I let each call go to voicemail. At 9:30, the text started. "What is this, Audrey? Call us immediately. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. Please answer your phone. You cannot do this to us. To your sister. We need to talk." I didn't respond. By noon, other family members began calling. My parents had started reaching out, either for support or to manage the narrative. My phone buzzed constantly with messages expressing confusion, shock, and in some cases outrage on my behalf. At 1 p.m., I received a call from an unknown international number. It was Hannah calling from her honeymoon. "What the hell, Audrey? Mom and Dad are completely freaking out. They said you're suing them on the day after my wedding. How could you be so selfish? Did they tell you why I'm suing them?" I asked calmly. "Something about the lake house. They said you changed your mind about helping with the wedding, and now you're being vindictive." "Hannah, they forged my signature and sold my house without my permission. They stole from me to pay for your wedding. Did you know about it?" There was a long pause. "I knew they were using money from the lake house sale," she finally said, her voice smaller. "But they told me you had agreed to it, that you were doing it as a wedding gift. And you believe that? That I would give up my inheritance from Grandpa Jack for your one-day celebration. It's not just one day," she protested weakly. "It's my marriage, my future with James." "Your marriage and future with James have nothing to do with stealing my property," I said. "If you knew nothing about the forgery, then my issue is not with you. But if you were complicit in any way, there will be consequences for that too." Hannah started crying. "You're ruining everything. We're going to have to come home early now. James is furious." "I'm sorry your honeymoon is being interrupted," I said, not feeling sorry at all. "But this is a situation of Mom and Dad's making, not mine." After hanging up, I turned off my phone. I needed space from the barrage of family drama. Instead, I called Stephanie from my landline. "Your parents contacted my office," she reported. "They're asking for a meeting, saying they want to resolve this as a family without legal involvement." "Too late for that," I said. "What about the Petersons? They're understandably upset. I've explained the situation, and they're cooperating with the process to unwind the sale. They'll be seeking damages from your parents for the fraud, but they're not blaming you." By evening, I turned my phone back on to find dozens of missed calls and messages. Most notably, a text from my father. "Family emergency meeting tomorrow at our house. 2 p.m. Please come. We need to fix this." I consulted with Stephanie and Martin. who both advised me not to meet with my parents alone. Stephanie would accompany me as my legal representation. When we arrived at my parents' house the next day, I was surprised to find not just my parents, but also Hannah and James, apparently back early from their honeymoon, my father's brother, Uncle Steve, and my mother's sister, Aunt Patricia. Clearly, my parents had called in reinforcements. My father looked shocked when I walked in with Stephanie. "Who is this?" "We said family only." "This is Stephanie Miller, my attorney," I said. "She goes wherever I go for discussions about this matter." "We don't need lawyers for a family discussion," my mother protested. "This stopped being just a family discussion when you committed fraud," I replied. The room felt uncomfortably silent. Hannah sat on the couch looking pale and tired, still in travel clothes. James stood behind her, his face tight with anger. Uncle Steve and Aunt Patricia exchanged uneasy glances. My father tried a different approach. "Audrey, honey, we know you're upset. There was a misunderstanding about the lake house. We thought we had your implicit consent." "Implicit consent?" I repeated. "You forged my signature on legal documents. You sold property that didn't belong to you. You took hundreds of thousands of dollars that were not yours to take. Which part of that was a misunderstanding?" "We were going to pay you back," my mother said weakly. "With what money? When? Or were you just hoping I wouldn't find out until it was too late?" No one answered. I opened my laptop and connected it to their television. "Let me show you exactly what happened, so there's no more room for misunderstandings." Over the next 30 minutes, I presented the evidence Stephanie and I had compiled. The forged documents with my fake signature, bank records showing the transfer of funds directly correlating with wedding expenses, the timeline of deliberate deception, Dorothy Matthews' statement, proof that the notary's signature and stamp had also been forged. When I finished, the room was deathly quiet. Hannah was openly crying. James looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. My aunt and uncle appeared horrified. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I asked my parents. "Not just legally, but to our family, to our relationship? You stole from me. You violated my trust in the most fundamental way possible." "For what?" "So Hannah could have gold flakes on her wedding cake." My father finally spoke, his voice subdued. "We made a terrible mistake. We got caught up in giving Hannah the wedding she wanted. We told ourselves we would figure out how to make it right with you later. By creating a false narrative where I had agreed to sell? By gaslighting me and lying to the entire family. We panicked," my mother admitted. "Once we started down this path, we didn't know how to stop." Hannah looked up, her makeup streaked with tears. "I didn't know they forged your signature, Audrey. I swear they told me you had agreed to help with the wedding by selling the lake house. I thought it was incredibly generous but not impossible. You've always been the responsible one. The one who makes sacrifices." The last sentence hung in the air, unintentionally revealing the family dynamic that had made this situation possible in the first place. I had always been expected to sacrifice for Hannah. This was just the most extreme version of a pattern established long ago. "What happens now?" my father asked, looking at Stephanie. "That depends partly on Audrey," she replied. "The legal process to unwind the fraudulent sale is already underway. The Petersons will need to be compensated for their troubles. There will be financial penalties and legal fees. As for criminal charges, that will be up to the district attorney, though Audrey's wishes will carry significant weight." All eyes turned to me. "I want my house back," I said firmly. "I want every penny that was taken from me returned, plus interest and damages. I want a public acknowledgement of what you did, and an apology to everyone you lied to about this. And I want you both to get counseling to understand why you thought this was acceptable." My parents nodded mutely. "As for criminal charges," I continued, "I don't want to see you in jail, but that may not be entirely up to me. What you did was a crime, and there may be consequences beyond what I can control." Uncle Steve cleared his throat. "I had no idea any of this was happening. Tom, Elizabeth, what were you thinking? This is your daughter, your own child." "We always favored Hannah," my mother said quietly. "We never meant to, but we did. She needed more, demanded more, and we responded to that. Audrey was always so capable, so self-sufficient. We took her for granted." "That's not an excuse for theft," I said. "No, it's not," my father agreed. "Nothing excuses what we did. We betrayed you, Audrey. We violated your trust, and we are so sorry. Their apology felt both genuine and wholly inadequate. The damage was done. Trust, once broken at such a fundamental level, could not be easily repaired. We will do whatever it takes to make this right, my mother added. I looked around the room at my family, seeing them with new clarity. The parents who had always prioritized Hannah's wants over my needs. The sister who had benefited from this dynamic her entire life. The extended family who had observed but never intervened. Making this right will take time, I said finally. And things will never be the same between us. That's the real cost of what you did. As Stephanie and I left the house, I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. I had stood up for myself, but at what cost? The family I had known was irreparably changed. Yet somehow I also felt lighter, as if a burden I had carried for years had finally been set down. The legal aftermath unfolded over the next 6 months. The sale of the lake house was invalidated. The Petersons were understandably upset, but ultimately settled for a compensation package from my parents. My parents liquidated investments and took out a home equity loan to repay me the full value of the property, plus interest and damages. They narrowly avoided criminal charges after the district attorney agreed to a deal that included community service, financial restitution, and mandatory counseling. The lake house returned to my possession, though not without emotional complications. The first time I visited after regaining ownership, I sat on the dock for hours, reconnecting with the property, processing everything. The space felt different, somehow tainted by the betrayal, yet still fundamentally mine. I spent that summer restoring it, both physically and spiritually. I replaced locks, installed a security system, repainted walls, refinished floors, updated the kitchen. Each improvement felt like reclaiming the space, making it mine again. My relationship with my family entered a new guarded phase. Hannah and I spoke infrequently. At first, our conversations were awkward and strained. She had returned most of the wedding gifts after learning the truth. Though she and James remained married, their honeymoon had been cut short, and the fairy tale beginning to their marriage had been irreparably tarnished. During one of our rare phone calls, Hannah finally asked the question that had clearly been bothering her. Would you have helped with the wedding if they had asked you directly? Would you have sold the lake house voluntarily? I considered the question carefully. No, I said finally. The lake house was never mine to give away for a wedding. It was Grandpa Jack's legacy, his life's work. He entrusted it to me specifically because he knew I valued it for what it was, not what it could be converted into. I might have contributed some money to your wedding, but the house was never an option. Hannah was quiet for a moment. I think I always knew that, she admitted. Maybe that's why I never questioned their story too deeply. It was easier to believe you had agreed than to face the truth. My parents and I established a careful distance. We spoke monthly, met occasionally for brief meals, but the easy familiarity was gone. They continued with their counseling, gradually coming to terms with the damage they had caused and the patterns that had led to their actions. We always thought we were doing what was best for both of you, my mother said during one difficult conversation. Hannah seemed to need more support, more attention, more resources. You were so capable, so independent. We told ourselves it balanced out somehow. It never balanced, I replied. You took my independence as permission to give everything to Hannah. Being self-sufficient became a punishment. My father nodded slowly. We see that now. We failed you, Audrey. Not just with the lake house but throughout your life. We took your strength for granted, instead of nurturing it. These conversations were painful but necessary. They represented the first honest exchanges we had ever had about the family dynamic that had shaped all our lives. 6 months after the wedding, I held a small gathering at the restored lake house. I invited close friends who had supported me, and a few extended family members who had reached out with genuine concern. My parents and Hannah were not invited, a boundary that felt necessary for my healing. As we sat around the fire pit that Grandpa Jack had built, watching the sunset over the lake, my friend Sophia raised her glass. To Audrey, who taught us all that standing up for yourself is not selfish. It is necessary. The simple toast brought tears to my eyes. For so long, I had accepted the narrative that putting my own needs first was somehow wrong. That sacrifice was my designated role in the family. Breaking that pattern had been painful but essential. The lake house became my sanctuary in a new way. I began spending one weekend a month there, sometimes alone, sometimes with friends. I established new traditions, new memories. I planted a garden, built a reading nook, and learned to sail on Grandpa Jack's old boat that I had carefully restored. A year after the wedding, Hannah and James welcomed their first child, a daughter they named Emma. The birth created an opportunity for cautious reconciliation. I visited them in the hospital, holding my tiny niece, feeling the complicated emotions of family bonds that persist despite deep wounds. "I want her to know her aunt," Hannah said, watching me rock the baby. "I want her to know the lake house and Grandpa Jack's legacy. I want things to be different for her than they were for us." It was the closest thing to a genuine apology I had received from my sister, an acknowledgement that the patterns needed to change for the next generation. 2 years after the wedding, I invited my parents to the lake house for the first time since the incident. It was a brief visit, just an afternoon, but an important step. They walked through the renovated space with visible emotion, noting the changes I had made while respecting the original character of the home. "Jack would be proud of what you've done here," my father said quietly, running his hand along the original woodwork. "He always said you understood the value of this place in a way the rest of us never did." My mother paused by the framed photo of Grandpa Jack that I had placed prominently in the living room. "We lost sight of what matters," she said. "We got caught up in appearances, in Hannah's demands, in our own insecurities as parents. We forgot that some things are worth more than money can measure." Their visit was neither a full reconciliation nor a complete forgiveness, but rather an acknowledgement that healing is a process, not an event. Some trust might eventually be rebuilt, but our relationship would never return to what it was before. Perhaps that was for the best. The most important lesson I learned through this ordeal was about the nature of boundaries. For years, I had allowed my family to take advantage of my independence and resilience. I had accepted less while Hannah received more, telling myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need their support or approval. But in doing so, I had enabled the very dynamic that ultimately led to the theft of my inheritance. Standing up for myself was not just about reclaiming the lake house. It was about reclaiming my place in the family narrative. It was about saying clearly, I matter. My needs matter. My inheritance matters. My boundaries matter. 3 years after the wedding, I stood on the dock at sunset, watching the light play across the water. The lake house was fully mine again in every sense. I had defended it, reclaimed it, restored it, and made new memories within its walls. Grandpa Jack's legacy continued, not just in the physical structure, but in the strength he had seen in me long before I recognized it in myself. And you know what? Feels good to finally breathe.